Martin Iwi is a senior researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, and he joins us now via Skype from Pretoria. Martin, thank you so much for joining us. Now, should South Africans be worried?
Well, this is not really something to cause panic. It doesn't call for that. The warning itself is called an advisory, which means it was just an advice, a cautionary advice to British citizens in South Africa. What that means is that they have intelligence pointing to the fact that it could be a possible attack on British interests in South Africa. Therefore, the British have, by law, to inform their citizens to give them caution. It's not the worst one, what we might call a red alert, which means that it is a travel ban where the British government could actually warn its citizens from traveling to South Africa. That's when, the intelligence is really concrete and it is imminent. In this case, an advisory just means that there is a potential attack, but, the evidence of that is not quite clear. And therefore, the British are warning their citizens to be extra cautious when in South Africa.
Now, Martin, how do foreign governments come to such conclusions, especially bearing in mind of the fact that they don't really consult with the governments of those countries? They just issue advisories or warnings to their citizens who are traveling to the countries, for instance, like South Africa.
Well, this government, especially when it comes to terrorism, these are the governments which are in the front line. We must recall the international coalition to defeat the Islamic State, which is ongoing in Syria and Iraq. These governments have intelligence on the movement of many of these groups, and therefore, they can actually have better information than South Africa. But I think in this particular case, it is really arising from the kidnapping that we saw of the couple with dual citizenship, South African, British. And then I think the British government may have additional information pointing to the fact that there could be more attacks on their interests in upscale market centers, including shopping malls and other public places where British interests will be at stake.
Martin, what's the likelihood of terror cells building up in South Africa?
Well, I think the assumption is that there exists such a cell which is very active. We also know that the Islamic State has recruited some South Africans. Whether those, pose a threat to South Africa, we don't know. But what we know is that the threat that the Islamic State has expressed to South Africa is really about foreign interests. We are talking of Western countries' interests in South Africa: the British, the Americans, the French, the Russians, the Jewish, and so on. So those interests are really at stake from evidence that we've seen from previous intelligence sources.
The Institute of Security Studies early last year identified South Africa as a high priority target for terrorist networks across the continent. Why is this the case? Why is South Africa seemingly an easy target?
Interesting enough, the South African threat is not like we find in other countries where the threat is really against the government, where terrorist groups have actually expressed grievances against a government and they want to go after that government. What we find every now and then in South Africa is that they are actually targeting foreign interests, against those that I've just mentioned, and those that are actually attracting terrorists because they believe that South Africa is an important country and therefore the investment or the interest of this government in South Africa is huge, more than in any other part of the continent, and therefore South Africa, for them, is a very strategic country. There are other points or other factors favoring terrorist, attraction to South Africa. As I said, they see South Africa to be very, very advanced. and therefore it provides an important logistics center where they can come here, utilize facilities, particularly social facilities. They can also use South African passports because they believe that it is much more important or much more easy to travel with South African passports to other countries in Europe, especially, and America, without attracting attention. And therefore, South Africa, for this reason, is an important location for them, not just for attacking, but also for logistic mobilization.
Martin, we saw the warning come through from the United Kingdom to their citizens visiting South Africa or possibly to visit South Africa, and then it was changed to an advisory. But also in the same breath, South Africa was complimented for having thwarted a planned previous terror attacks. Why is this the case?
Well, you will recall the incident of the Tuesday that happened last year, where the South African government was able to intercept. It was not the only interception. I think we've also recorded some very vital interceptions of the government. Being able to intercept many of these individuals, either from traveling to Syria or from being recruited, or actually from carrying out attacks, as we saw with the Tuesday. So, yes, the government is working very hard. I think the question has been posed whether does South Africa have the capability to really confront, a potential terrorist attack. I think we need to give the government the benefit of the doubt here. Since 2002, we've not recorded any major terrorist attack, particularly a foreign terrorist attack in this country. And I don't think that has happened by coincidence. I think it's because of the deliberate effort being put into it by the government, the vigilance of security agencies, and so on. So the mechanisms are in place. But again, one has to insist that the current threat that we face is huge, very, very huge. As I said, that the Islamic State is losing its bases in Syria and Iraq, and therefore they are looking for a potential basis. And Africa, for them, is the most appealing because of the conditions of the country. Security is extremely weak in Africa. The abundance of resources where they can mobilize and revitalize their campaign. So, and therefore, Africans need to be extra cautious, extra sensitive to what is developing in Syria and Iraq, because the fallout of that will be in Africa. And South Africa, being a major country in Africa, is also faced with this very high risk, not just because of the country's image, but also because of the fact that many countries in the continent do not have the capability to really confront a potential Islamic State attack in the continent.
Martin, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Martin Iwi, who is a senior researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, and he joins us via Skype from Pretoria. Time now for a quick